From marrying underage girls to murdering them all at the end, this is the case of Mary Rose and Annette Craver. Was Mary Rose a bad mother, or did Annette make a mistake by falling in love? Come along with us as we unravel this mind-boggling mystery to discover who the true murderer is. This is Unsolved Files, a place where crime stories are being brought to your doorstep. What are you waiting for? Just hit the subscribe button for more fascinating and suspense-filled crime stories. Now, let's get back into this story and uncover this mystery. Annette Craver, who was just 15 at time, and her mother, Mary Rose, were selling things from their late father and Mary's late husband in their backyard on September 8, 1981, in Houston, Texas. Mary Rose had lost her husband in a car accident 2 years before. Although Mary was uninformed, Annette was nevertheless profoundly impacted by her father's death. She spent a lot of time by herself, writing poems, painting, playing guitar, and even singing. Her mother even asked if she wanted to see an expert to talk about it, but she said she was okay. During this period, Annette met 40-year-old Felix Ville. Perhaps it was because Annette missed her father so much, or because Felix exhibited an exceptional charm. But the girl fell madly in love with him. Her mother saw no danger in the man who emerged in their backyard on a motorcycle. After all, he was older than Annette. She saw her daughter conversing with him, but figured he was just another customer. Mary, to be honest, was too busy with her own business to be watchful. She needed a job after her husband passed away, but she was unable to locate one in Houston. As a result, when an opportunity in the nearby state of Oklahoma presented itself, she opted to go, leaving Annette in the care of a close friend so that her daughter may finish school in peace while she settled into her new home. It appeared to be the best solution for everyone, but Mary quickly regretted it. As it turned out, Felix would come by the house quite frequently. Annette appeared to have been abandoned by her mother, and Felix skillfully exploited her weakness. He subjugated Annette to his power and urged her to accompany him on a motorcycle ride after school. Simultaneously, Mary, who was ignorant of this, had been working tirelessly for months to share wonderful news with her daughter. She had purchased a home for them, naming both of them as owners. Mary was devastated to learn that her daughter had already left with Felix to tour the country aimlessly. Mary chastised herself for not being available for her child and for not making a different choice. Annette and Felix were surviving on the allowance Annette had received upon her father's death. She wrote letters to her mother and called a year later to get Mary's permission to marry Felix. The mom tried to urge her daughter to wait until she became 18, but she was certain that they either marry in California with her consent, or they would go to Mexico and marry there. Mary consented, realizing she didn't have much of a choice, and worrying that refusing would push her daughter away. Besides, Mary had never met Felix, and assumed that if her daughter adored him, he must be a decent man. Annette's letters, however, began to imply that Felix had changed soon after the wedding. He had gradually gained entire control of her life, including forcing his young wife into having an illegal abortion when she became pregnant. The mother pleaded with her daughter to return home, and Annette mustered the fortitude to break away from Felix's clutches and return to her mother. Despite the fact that Annette was back at home with her mother, it appeared like only her shell had returned, leaving her soul somewhere else. She wasn't herself, she was disoriented. The mother and daughter were painting the walls of their new home when the video was taken, and Annette gazed straight into the camera with that tight glare, as if to say, "What do you want from me?" Even if her daughter was no longer herself, the mother was relieved to have her back. Unfortunately, the moment of rest was brief. Felix began disconnecting their phone lines in order to talk with his wife, and a few weeks later, he simply showed up, strolled in without permission, and went right to Annette. They spent some time together before demanding that Mary leave the house. Mary tried everything she could to fix this issue with her daughter, but Felix's influence was too powerful. Mary had little choice but to give in because the house was purchased not only with Mary's savings, but also with the money of her late husband, Annette's father, and the two women were listed as owners. She didn't want to abandon her child for the second time, so she gave up half of her house, packed her belongings, and relocated to California. Annette soon reached 18 and was able to access the money given to her as an inheritance from her father, which was estimated to be in the $100,000.
In 1983, Annette inherited about $100,000.
The majority of the money was used to pay off Felix's debts. Annette also gave him full ownership of the house. When Mary learned of this, she quickly called her son-in-law, who informed her that he had placed her daughter on a bus bound for Mexico. She allegedly set out on a spiritual journey with the intention of changing her name, so she would never be found or harassed. His narrative didn't make any sense, especially as the bus stop from which Annette allegedly went did not exist. Therefore, Mary called the police to report her daughter missing, not trusting a word he said. Officers came to see Felix, but unfortunately for Mary, he appeared nice to them, as her daughter had found him 3 years before. He persuaded them that the girl had gone off on her own. Mary continued to try to contact authorities, but because they refused to investigate the disappearance in the absence of evidence, the woman was left with only hope. Mary sat by the phone every Christmas, her and Annette's birthdays, and Mother's Day for years, expecting the girl to call and say, "Hello, Mom." But as the years passed and her worries grew, she began to wonder why her daughter refused to visit her. She wouldn't tell anybody else about her, especially since her mother had always supported her daughter and had never pushed her away, and Annette couldn't disguise her bitterness over the years. After 7 years and hundreds of letters to the police, the FBI, and Felix personally, all went unanswered. Mary could handle the silence anymore and decided she would not wait any longer for the police to act, so she launched her own inquiry. It's worth mentioning that the internet was still in its infancy at the time, so any information had to be pieced together from numerous sources. She began with the best lead she could locate, Sue Jordan, Felix's sister, and traveled halfway across the country to meet with her. After speaking with her, Mary Rose learned that her daughter may have been the victim of a crime, as Annette was not the only one of Felix's lovers who had been harmed. Sue informed her that Felix had a wife named Mary Horton who died in unexplained circumstances. With this new information, Mary contacted someone she thought could assist her in completing the puzzle. Will Horton, Mary Horton's younger brother, had always felt, along with his parents, that his sister's death was a murder, and his suspicions were confirmed when he answered Mary Rose's phone call in the early 2000s. Will didn't mince words about what he knew about the situation. He was 15 years old when his older sister drowned in Louisiana's Coosa River. Mary Horton met Felix while attending college in 1960. They married 6 months later, and their son Bill Ville was born exactly 1 year later. Everything transformed in the household so drastically after Bill's birth that Mary went to her parents with her kid. She wanted to divorce her husband, but the term divorce was practically taboo back then, especially for a Catholic family like the Hortons. As a result, her mother convinced Mary to come home and attempt to reconcile with her husband, but she died before she could do so. According to Felix, he and Mary left their 3-month-old kid with relatives and went fishing on a friend's boat, despite the fact that Felix had never been known to partake in such an activity before. Mary was in the front of the boat, holding a torch, and the couple was 5 miles from the shore. When she observed a log poking out of the water, Felix swiftly turned the boat, and Mary fell into the water as a result of the sharp maneuver. He jumped in to try to find her before coming to shore and immediately informing the police. The authorities suspected him of lying, since returning to shore would have required him to travel 5 kilometers, past other boats, docks, and countless people. Why didn't he ask for their assistance? Furthermore, Felix said that he and his wife meant to cast their fishing lines, but no fishing equipment was discovered in the lake, which was typically regarded as unsuitable for fishing. It was also odd that Mary boarded the boat without wearing a life jacket. The problem was that she was terrified of drowning. It was her phobia. Therefore, why didn't she use the life jacket?
You could go in a swimming pool. She was fine as long as she could see the bottom.
You call that dark water down here, right?
Dark water.
And that means you can't see through it.
According to Felix, She was breastfeeding the infant, and any more clothing on her chest caused a challenge during this time. Mary knew how to swim and should have been able to reach the shore despite her fear of drowning. Felix asserted that she had struck her head on a rock in the water, but there were no rocks in that section of the lake. Felix was arrested but never charged, since the matter was never heard in court. Mary's body was recovered from the sea 2 days later, with a scarf wrapped around her mouth and neck. There was no water in her lungs, a massive open wound on the back of her head, as if she had been struck by something, and her sweater sleeves were covered in blood. Furthermore, she had clearly been dragged, and everything pointed to murder. To the coroner's surprise, a different opinion evolved. Mary drowned as a result of an accident, according to the coroner. How could a murder case be probed if the coroner ruled that it was not murder? As a result, Felix had to be set free. He received an insurance settlement after his wife died, but he did not even pay for her funeral. In reality, he'd taken out 2 insurance policies in Mary's name, each for $150,000 or $500,000 in today's money. One policy had been paid in full some months prior to the incident. The insurance company assumed the spouse had only paid him a portion of the money, so Felix Ville, the young widower, kept his freedom, collected the money, and wandered the cities in search of his next romantic adventure. And according to Mary Rose, Felix's second serious relationship was with Sharon Hensley. Sharon's mother approached the Horton family, trying to learn more about Felix and her daughter, who had vanished under unusual circumstances. Once again, Mary Rose set out, this time to Bismarck, North Dakota, to meet Sharon's brother, Brian Hensley. Sharon worked as a model. She was professionally involved in dance, and she was a very free-spirited young woman. Like many young people in America in the late 1960s, after his wife's death, Felix also fell under the spell of the hippie lifestyle. He became a wandering preacher and the leader of his own cult. Around this time, he met 21-year-old Sharon, who set out on a trip to California. Despite the 10-year age difference, she was taken with him. Felix and Sharon didn't work, but lived on the road, moving from vineyard to vineyard, and mostly subsisting on grapes. He increasingly abused illicit substances and behaved more aggressively towards the girl. Her brother was certain that at that moment she stayed with him out of fear, not knowing how to extricate herself from this situation. During a visit to the girl's family, her relatives were horrified at the sight of her, the former model and dancer. She had always been beautiful, athletic, and fit. Now Sharon looked exhausted and lost. When she was asked a question, she only answered after Felix gave his permission. Soon, Sharon called her mother for the last time, and as it turned out, Felix must have been standing next to her, listening to every word. But even from her daughter's voice, her mother understood that the girl was in danger. However, the family was unable to do anything. By 1973, Sharon had stopped contacting her relatives and friends, and they did not know that she had disappeared for a whole year. Felix wrote to them, presenting a fantastic story that Sharon had left him to go to Australia on a boat with 2 strangers she had met in Florida. Felix told the Hensley family roughly the same thing that he would later tell Annette's mother, that she wanted to start a new life with a new identity, and burned all documents before fleeing. But later, Felix used different names. He supposedly didn't know their surnames at all. Of course, the Hensleys didn't buy it and reported their daughter missing, but with no evidence, the police had nothing to work with. Felix's tactic was clear. He took these daughters as far away from their mothers as possible before writing them letters, stating that the girls no longer wanted to be contacted. What irony, Felix Ville always spoke of the girls' desire for freedom, but he completely controls their lives and rarely lets them go. Sharon Hensley never returned, and no one ever saw her again. From 1975 to 1977, several other very young girls became Felix's wives, but these marriages were very short-lived, which probably saved these girls' lives. Then, in 1981, Felix Ville met 15-year-old Annette Craver. What happened to Mary and Felix's son, Bill, during all this time? At first, the young father left his son in the care of his parents, but when he went to California, he took the child with him. Mary Horton's family had no idea that Bill was forced to follow his father wherever he went. The boy suffered from his father's aggression until he was 8 years old, when he ran to a police station in search of any help he could find. He told the officers that his father made him take illicit substances, supposedly to expand his consciousness, but he just wanted to go home.
Bill went no shoes, no socks to the police station and said, "My daddy's making me smoke marijuana, and he wanted me to take LSD, and I want to go home."
This led to the arrest of Felix and Sharon. After their arrest, Bill had to testify against his father, and 3 months later, they were released and they continued to travel together while the boy went to live with his maternal grandparents. Mary Rose believed that a visit to the now grown-up Bill could provide her with more evidence and clues about his father's whereabouts. She packed her things again and headed to Kansas to meet Bill and his family. Like previous visits, this one went quite well. Bill turned out to be an open, kind, and understanding person. But he was horrified by the thought of his father. He wanted Felix to stay as far away from his wife and children as possible, but he agreed to take the risk to seek justice for his mother. It was Bill's story that confirmed all of Mary's fears. When the boy was 8 years old, before he ran to the police, he accidentally overheard a conversation between Felix and Sharon. Felix told the girl that he had killed Bill's mother. Sharon obviously didn't understand and began to calm him down, saying that it was natural for him to feel responsible for her death. But Felix replied, "No, you don't understand. I really killed her." After Felix's arrest, Bill was adopted by his maternal grandparents, but the fear of his father remained. He couldn't stop thinking that Felix would come back someday. The boy understood what that meant, but couldn't share it with anyone. From that day on, Bill was certain that if he revealed this secret, he or his family could become the next victims. However, he responded to Mary Rose's request because he also wanted justice for his mother, Sharon, and Annette. Although Bill died of cancer in 2009, he asked the priest to record his words, confessing to the crimes Felix had committed.
He told her that he had murdered my mother, the girlfriend, saying, "I know you must just feel responsible for it. You just feel responsible." He said, "No, you don't understand. I really did kill her."
After decades of searching, Mary Rose believed that she now had a case against Felix. There was still no physical evidence, but she believed that the testimonies of the Hortons, Hensley, her own, and Felix's son Bill could convince the FBI that the cases needed to be reopened. Unfortunately, it was precisely at this time that government budget cuts had a significant impact on the entire Department of Unsolved Cases at the FBI, and once again, no one was willing to listen to Mary. She was ashamed that she had stirred up trouble and given hope to the families of the victims, and now it had all ended before it even began. In June 2011, almost 30 years after her daughter's disappearance, Mary Rose was listening to the radio at home when a program featuring an investigative reporter who had solved several high-profile cases began. In particular, he had uncovered a series of 8 murders that had remained unsolved for almost 50 years. Mary sat in her living room, stunned as she listened, and then realized that this man was not afraid of unsolved cases and that she needed to contact him. She didn't waste a minute, picked up the phone, and quickly managed to get in touch with the reporter from Mississippi, who goes by the name Jerry Mitchell. She asked him straight up, "Jerry, if you knew that a serial killer was on the loose, would you be interested in the case?" "Of course," he replied without hesitation, and Mary told him about Felix Vail. She tried to explain all the pieces of the puzzle that she had gathered, but one detail became known to her only recently. Felix had returned to Mississippi. It was a coincidence that could be taken as a sign from above. Mary had one more card up her sleeve. She had obtained Felix's exact address and was eager to pay him a surprise visit. Jerry's reaction to her idea was unexpected. He volunteered to go with her, and so they set off to the provided address, a remote trailer park. As they circled Felix's residence, Mary noticed that the owner was not at home, but the back window of the trailer had been smashed. She crawled inside through it. Jerry couldn't shake off the thought that the homeowner might return any minute. But Mary remained undeterred. At 64 years old, she was tired of Felix Vale. She was determined to get to the truth, no matter the cost. Inside, with a camera in her hand, she found a multitude of religious texts related to the cult and various weapons, but nothing that could be useful in their investigation. When Mary emerged from the trailer, she and Jerry noticed someone running toward them. It wasn't Felix, but one of his sisters, Kay Faulkner, who also lived in the trailer park. Initially, she didn't like their intrusion, but when they explained the reason for their visit, her expression changed. Kay stated that she too believed her brother had something to do with the girls' deaths. Felix had been uncontrollable since childhood, never acknowledging anyone's authority, to the point that at 17, he was rejected when he tried to become a pilot. He had successfully passed all the tests and scored top marks, indicating impressive intellectual abilities, but his difficult nature and defiance would have been a problem during service. Even Felix's own family believed in his guilt because of his temperament and was pleasantly surprised that his first day of investigation had yielded so much fruit that Jerry Mitchell got to work. He listened to Bill Vale's testimony, spoke with the Hortons, Hensley, and Mary Rose, and began to write. Of course, he had other projects as well, so the book was released 4 years later. However, it garnered numerous awards and created such a stir that the FBI employees reopened the cases. Felix was arrested 7 months after Jerry's work emerged. Mary Horton's case, the one that offered hope for a trial, had only her body found. But since her death had been deemed an accident, the police had never searched for any evidence related to her death. Nearly 50 years later, neither the police who worked on the case nor any evidence could be found, and yet they still needed to find the perpetrator, someone daring enough to take on a seemingly hopeless case. And Hugh Holland turned out to be just the right person. Fortunately for him, private investigator Gina Frenzel learned about the case and decided to work on it pro bono. Gina enjoyed working undercover and managed to gain Felix's trust. When he was arrested, he gave her permission to visit his house. There, among the vast array of swords and cult literature, she found hidden stacks of personal journals that the man had been writing from the 1980s until 2010. His journals were incredibly detailed, filled with everyday things, such as what he had for breakfast in the morning. Felix admitted that he aimed to control every woman in his life and didn't shy away from physical violence. He even had a paragraph about how he enjoyed drinking fresh blood, but made no confessions of murder.
If you were going to eat animals, you would have to kill them and drink the blood.
Okay.
Right. Well,
like immediately, like it was formed.
You know, suck it out of the body, drain it out of the body, and drink it right then.
Particularly, entire sections of the journals were missing precisely during the periods when something happened to Mary, Sharon, and Annette. Gina found only one indirect admission from the man after his mother's death. Felix had to clean out the apartment, the occupied and burned part of the journals he kept there. During that time, he wrote that with all the family situations, and as he revisited and burned the journals, he learned to resolve conflicts without resorting to murder. Gina also found a birth certificate and a photo for Annette's passport in his house. This meant that the girl couldn't have gone to Mexico without documents since she didn't have a driver's license yet. But this was still not enough for the court, and the prosecutor began to search for witnesses. As luck will have it, they found one. It was Ike Iyer. Holland went to Ike's house to meet him. He was greeted by a 90-year-old man in a wheelchair, but fortunately with a clear memory. Ike was a neighbor of Felix when he lived in Lake Charles. Ike's father owned a large boat, and the sheriff's office reached out to him to help search for Mary's body. Ike was on his father's boat when they found the body. He recounted that when Mary was pulled out of the water, everyone realized it was murder because her neck was swollen, and the scarf wasn't just wrapped around her neck and mouth, but was deeply inserted into her throat, clearly serving as a gag. But Ike didn't limit himself to memories of that day alone. He gave the prosecutor an envelope containing 2 photographs of Mary's body. The prosecutor didn't even expect to find anything like that since the police hadn't preserved any crime scene photos. With the evidence and the witness, the prosecutor charged Felix with the murder of his first wife. Ike was key to the case. Without his testimony presenting those photos in court, it would have been impossible to prove it was a murder. 3 months after giving his testimony in court, Ike passed away, but the truth he managed to reveal was heard by the jury. Several more witnesses appeared in court. They were friends with Felix during the period. When the man was married to Mary, he confessed to them that Mary was pregnant again. She thought that the birth of their second child would save their marriage. In reality, Felix didn't want even one child, and hence, he killed her. In 2016, just 10 minutes of deliberation, the jury found Felix guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced him to life imprisonment. During the sentencing, members of all 3 families sat together holding hands. Over the years, thanks to Mary Rose's relentless pursuit of the truth, they had become one family. Well, of course, Felix was not convicted for what they believed he had done to the other girls, but additional charges would not have affected the sentence. He would still have been sentenced to life imprisonment. From their point of view, justice and truth still prevailed. It became the oldest unsolved case in the history of the United States, ceased after 54 years. What are your thoughts about this particular story? Share your comments with us in the comment section below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button to get more intriguing stories like this. Also, you can check out this next video on your screen to see the 14-year mystery of a missing teen mom solved by a single message. What are you still waiting for? This video has ended. Go watch it now.